Welcome back to Sleepy Science History. I'm glad you're here. Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever looked up at the night sky and felt that quiet tug inside you? The way the moon seems to pull not only the tides, but also your thoughts? It sits there, silver and constant, as if it has always belonged. But imagine, just for a moment, that tomorrow you wake up, and it's gone. No crescent above the rooftops. No pale circle slipping behind the clouds. Just darkness. Would you notice first when stepping outside at night, seeing the stars sharper, more numerous, but somehow lonelier? Or would it be the silence of the ocean's rhythm, tides suddenly behaving in strange, unsettling ways? Maybe you'd feel it in your bones because, after all, aren't we creatures of rhythm, of cycles and hidden pulls? Tonight, let's wander slowly through this question together. What if the moon suddenly disappeared? Not rushed, not in fear, but with the curiosity of a bedtime story that isn't quite a story, but a gentle unraveling of science and wonder. I'll guide you, and you can close your eyes if you like. Imagine yourself sitting somewhere safe, wrapped in warmth, as we ask the first question. What would truly happen if the moon left us behind? If you're like me, the first thought might be about light. Without the moon, the nights would be darker. How much darker, though? The moon doesn't shine on its own, of course. It borrows its glow from the sun, reflecting it down to us. Yet that reflection is powerful enough to cast shadows, to light paths through forests, to make the sea shimmer like liquid silver. Without it, only starlight would remain, and though stars are bright in number, they don't give us much to see by. Would humans adjust? Maybe. After all, many creatures already thrive in deep night. Owls, foxes, fireflies, moths. We could light our cities artificially, of course, we already do. But I wonder, what would happen to villages, far from electric bulbs, that have always depended on the moon to guide their farmers, their fishermen, their wanderers? Pause for a moment. Imagine walking home late one evening along a familiar road. Normally, the moon is your companion, keeping watch over your steps. Now, without it, the path is swallowed by shadow. Do you feel lost? Or do you feel humbled, part of a sky suddenly endless? But darkness is only the beginning. The moon, as gentle as it seems, is a sculptor of motion. It pulls at the oceans with invisible strings, tugging them into tides. Twice a day, we see the seas rise and fall, the coast breathing in and out. Without the moon, what becomes of this rhythm? The sun also tugs at our oceans, but not with the same elegance. Solar tides are weaker, rougher, less steady. If the moon vanished, tides would shrink to about a third of their usual size. To some, that might sound like a relief. No more giant waves, no more flooding harbors. But think again. Tides are more than just water sloshing about. They are engines of mixing. They stir nutrients in the oceans, lifting food from the deep up to the surface, where plankton and fish thrive. Without tides, much of the sea would grow still, stagnant, deprived of its regular stirring. Can you picture it? Oceans as vast silent bowls, their life locked away, their abundance dimming like a candle in the wind. And here's a curious thought. Some scientists believe life itself may have begun because of tides. In ancient tidal pools, wetting and drying cycles may have helped spark the chemistry that created the first cells. Without tides, would Earth have ever become alive in the first place? It's strange, isn't it, to think that we may owe our very breath to the moon's invisible pull. Now let's turn our gaze from the sea to the seasons. The moon doesn't just stir water. It steadies Earth itself. Picture our planet as a spinning top. Alone, without help, it would wobble chaotically over long stretches of time. The moon acts as a hand, holding the top steady, keeping Earth's tilt at a gentle angle. This tilt, about 23.5 degrees, is the reason we have seasons. Without the moon's steadying hand, that tilt might wander, drifting wildly from 0 to 60 degrees over eons. Imagine summers where the sun barely sets, winters where it never rises. Entire continents could swing from tropical forests to frozen deserts. Life as we know it, human cultures, animal migrations, agriculture, relies on the moon's quiet patience, balancing us in place. And so I wonder, if the moon left us, how long would it take before Earth's tilt grew restless? 1,000 years? 1,000,000? Would our descendants find themselves in strange climates, their homelands transformed beyond recognition? Or would they adapt, as humans so often do, bending like reeds in the wind? You might be asking now, what about us? Not just Earth, not just the seas, but humanity itself. The moon has been with us since the beginning of stories. Ancient people carved its phases into bones and stones, a calendar in the sky. Poets, lovers, dreamers, all found inspiration in its glow. Entire religions wove the moon into their myths. To lose it suddenly would not just be a scientific event, but a cultural wound. Think of the word lunatic, born from the belief that madness swelled with the full moon. Think of calendars, guided by its cycles. Think of every bedtime tale where a child whispers goodnight to the moon. Without it, nights would feel incomplete, as though the sky had forgotten something essential. And you, how would you feel? If one night the moon did not rise, would you shrug, or would you mourn? Would you wait for it, night after night, hoping it might return like a lost friend? Now let's play with the imagination a little further. If the moon vanished suddenly, what would happen to Earth's creatures that rely on its light? Sea turtles hatch by moonlight, finding their way to the sea. Many birds migrate at night, steering by lunar cues. Fireflies flash brighter when the moon is dim, hiding from predators. Remove the moon, and all these rhythms unravel. Entire ecosystems would falter, like an orchestra suddenly missing its conductor. And I can't help but ask, what about us? Again, what about our inner rhythms? We may not notice it directly, but some studies suggest human sleep cycles and moods are subtly influenced by the moon's phases. Perhaps, without it, our nights would grow stranger. Perhaps dreams themselves would change. Now, I want you to imagine one last picture with me before we pause our journey. You stand at the edge of an ocean. The horizon is black. Above you, the stars are sharp and countless, unblunted by lunar glow. The sea at your feet is still, unervingly calm, its tides no longer breathing as before. The world seems quieter, but also emptier. You realize then, with a deep and humbling certainty, that the moon was not just decoration. It was a partner, a guardian, an ancient companion. So let me ask you, if we lost the moon tomorrow, would we survive? Yes, most likely. Humanity is clever, resilient, stubborn. We would find ways to adjust. But would we thrive? Would we still be ourselves? Or would something essential be missing? And that, dear listener, is where we will leave this first wandering. A single chapter, a single question. What would we be in a world without the moon? Take the thought with you as you drift into rest tonight. Let it sit gently in the back of your mind. And remember, the moon is still there now, waiting for you when you next look up. Until then, sleep well, dream deeply, and thank you for joining me here at Sleepy Science History. Have you ever wondered how something so gentle-looking as the moon could have such a violent beginning? We see it now as a calm companion in the night, glowing softly above fields and seas. But long ago, it may have been born out of chaos, out of fire, molten rock, and a cosmic collision so immense that even the stars might have turned their heads, if they could. The question lingers like a whisper. How did the moon come to be? Was it always there, cradled beside Earth like a twin? Or was it flung into existence by chance, a survivor of a cataclysm no one remembers? Scientists call this story the giant impact hypothesis. But let's not rush past it with technical names. Instead, picture Earth in its infancy, barely formed, still glowing with heat from its creation. Its surface is unstable, oceans not yet settled, continents not yet drawn. Now imagine, through the silence of space, another young world drifting closer. Not a stranger exactly, but a near equal in size, heavy with rock and iron. Then the collision. Not gentle, not slow, but apocalyptic. The impact sent waves of molten stone hurtling into orbit, a ring of debris glowing like a fiery halo around the battered Earth. Have you ever stood by a bonfire and watched sparks leap upward into the night? That was Earth, 4.5 billion years ago, casting sparks that would one day cool and gather into the moon. It is strange, isn't it, to think of the moon not as something separate, but as a piece of Earth itself, torn away in a single violent instant. When you look up at it, are you really looking at Earth's reflection, a long-lost fragment glowing back at us? But questions linger. Could it have been another way? Some scientists once imagined that the moon was captured, a wandering body snared by Earth's gravity as it drifted too close. Others thought it might have coalesced beside Earth in the same orbit, siblings from the start. Yet, none of these tales feel as complete, as haunting, as the story of a shattered Earth piecing itself together again. And you, if you had to choose a version of the moon's birth, which would you find most comforting? A quiet sibling, a captured traveler, or a child of fire and destruction? Now let's drift forward, far from those first days of violence, into a time when the moon became something else entirely. A storyteller in the sky. Picture the first humans gazing upward. No telescopes, no equations, no physics, just eyes, wonder, and the vast expanse of night. The moon was there to guide them, waxing and waning in predictable cycles. It was a clock in the heavens, a calendar before calendars. Can you imagine what it must have felt like to measure time not in hours or days, but in crescents, halves, and full glowing circles? Across cultures, myths bloomed like constellations. In ancient China, they told of Chang'e, the goddess of the moon, who drank an elixir of immortality and floated upward to her silver home. In Greek myth, the goddess Selene rode a chariot across the sky, her pale light brushing the earth with tenderness. The Inuit spoke of the moon as a watchful brother chasing the sun, sometimes catching her in eclipses. What story would you have told had you lived thousands of years ago, sitting around a fire with the moon overhead? Would it be a tale of love, of loss, of a guiding spirit? Or perhaps a warning? Because the moon, though beautiful, can vanish in eclipses, turn blood red, and inspire awe tinged with fear. Let's pause here. Do you notice how the moon is more than a rock in the sky? It is a mirror for human imagination. Every culture projected its longings and fears onto it. And perhaps that is the most mysterious thing. The moon didn't change, but our interpretations of it did. The waxing and waning of the moon became symbols of life and death, of rebirth and cycles. Farmers planted by its phases. Lovers swore vows beneath it. Travelers trusted it to guide their journeys. Without it, would human history have unfolded the same way? Would our calendars be different, our stories emptier, our art less filled with longing? But let's return gently to the science. The moon was not always at the distance we see it now. It is slowly drifting away, about 4 centimeters each year. You might laugh at that tiny number, but consider this. Long ago, the moon was closer, looming larger in the sky, pulling tides to greater heights. Can you imagine standing on a shore 3 billion years ago, watching waves rise far higher than today? The nights must have been wild and luminous, the moon a giant presence filling the sky. Perhaps life itself evolved in response to that tidal rhythm, the tug and release, the cycles of water that nurtured fragile beginnings. And if it continues drifting away, as it has for billions of years, what does that mean for us? Will there be a time, far into the future, when the moon is too distant to hold Earth steady, when eclipses no longer fit so perfectly, when tides are weaker and quieter? The thought makes me wonder, are we living in a golden age, when the moon and Earth are still close enough to dance together in balance? Let's ask another question. If the moon has always been there for us, what have we given in return? Humanity has long dreamed of touching it, and in the 20th century we finally did. Think of that moment, 1969, astronauts setting foot on the lunar dust. The first words spoken there carried across space, back to a planet where billions held their breath. Do you think the moon was changed by that moment, or only us? To the moon, it was a brief encounter, footprints that will linger for millions of years in its airless stillness. To us, it was proof that the boundary between dreaming and doing could be crossed. Since then, we've sent machines, probes, rovers. We've mapped its craters, studied its rocks, measured its silence. And yet, haven't we also romanticized it more than ever? Songs, poems, lullabies still call upon the moon as a friend. Even when science pulls back the curtain, the mystery remains. I find myself asking, why are we so drawn to it? Is it because the moon is both near and far, reachable yet untouchable? Or because it reflects us back to ourselves, our history, our fragility, our longing for connection? Maybe it's because the moon is steady. While stars rise and set, while planets wander across the zodiac, the moon remains loyal to its cycle, predictable and close. Perhaps deep inside we crave that rhythm. And yet, the moon is not as passive as it seems. It shapes Earth's destiny, pulls at its oceans, steadies its tilt. Without it, Earth would wobble more, climates would shift more violently. The moon, silent and unassuming, is a guardian. Do you ever think of it that way? A guardian you never asked for, but one that never leaves? And yet, there is a humbler side to this story. The moon does not shout its importance. It hangs silently, often overlooked, yet always present. Isn't it strange how often the most crucial influences in life are quiet ones? A tide you don't notice until it is gone. A steady rhythm you assume will last forever. I wonder, if one night the moon truly did vanish, how long would it take before the silence of the oceans, the strangeness of the skies, made us realize what we had lost? Let's turn briefly to myth again. Cultures across the world sense the moon's ties to fertility, cycles, and renewal. In some traditions, the moon was a goddess, her phases mirroring the cycles of life and death. In others, it was a protector of crops, a guardian of rhythms. Isn't it remarkable how stories and science converge? Ancient people may not have spoken of tidal mixing or orbital stability, but they felt the truth in their bones. The moon nurtures life. And so the question remains, how much of who we are, our biology, our culture, our very survival is shaped by that pale circle above? Imagine for a moment a world with no moon from the start. No strong tides, no stable tilt, no steady rhythms lighting the night. Would life have formed at all? Or would Earth be barren, a world of chaos and silence? If life did manage to spark, would it be fragile, unstable, struggling to adapt to erratic climates? Would creatures like us ever have arisen, capable of looking up and asking these questions? Sometimes the absence of something reveals its importance more clearly than its presence. And so, as we breathe slowly and let this thought settle, perhaps you feel the moon's presence in a new way. It is not just a glowing orb, not just a companion for poets and dreamers. It is an architect of life, a quiet partner that has shaped oceans, seasons, rhythms, and perhaps even the possibility of existence itself. When you next see it, maybe you'll think not just of its beauty, but of its gift, that without it you might not be here at all. And doesn't that make the moon, in its silence, the most generous of companions? Have you ever thought about how many stories, songs, and dreams would vanish if the moon were not there? Not just the tides, not just the seasons, but the poetry, the myths, the art that has kept humanity company for thousands of years. Would our history feel emptier? Would our nights lose their mystery? It is curious, isn't it, how a pale disk of rock, hanging so far away, has become one of the most powerful symbols in human imagination. Perhaps no other object in the sky has inspired more legends. The sun may give us life, but it is too bright, too overwhelming. The stars are countless, but they blur together. The moon is different, close enough to see, distant enough to wonder about, steady enough to trust, and changeable enough to tell stories around. So let's wander gently through this thought. What does the moon mean to human culture? And how has it shaped the way we tell our stories about ourselves? Imagine the first storytellers, gathered by firelight. Above them, the moon rises, sometimes a thin silver blade, sometimes a glowing coin, sometimes gone altogether. How do you explain such transformations? Wouldn't you too invent tales of gods and goddesses, of chariots and lovers, of cycles of death and rebirth? In ancient Mesopotamia, the moon was Sin, a god who marked the passing of time, guiding the calendar for farming and rituals. In Egypt, the moon was Thoth, the keeper of wisdom, linked with writing and knowledge. The Greeks gave us Selene and Artemis, the Romans, Luna and Diana. In India, Chandra glides through the heavens in a chariot pulled by white horses. In South America, the Inca worshipped Mama Quilla, the mother of the night, who ruled alongside the sun god. Isn't it astonishing how across continents, across oceans, cultures that never met still found the moon to be divine? Almost as though humanity shared an instinctive reverence, as if our ancestors all gazed upward and whispered the same awe into different languages. But the moon is not just a goddess or a god. In stories, it is often a mirror for human emotion. Lovers swear by it. Poets describe heartbreak through its phases. Artists paint it as a backdrop for solitude, for longing, for beauty that feels untouchable. Why do you think that is? Perhaps because the moon is always present, but never fully ours. We can see it, admire it, write to it, but never hold it. Doesn't that sound like love or yearning? A closeness that is also distance. Shakespeare wrote of it. Haiku poets captured it. Musicians still sing about it. From Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata to Billie Holiday's Blue Moon, we turn to it again and again, as if the moon were not just an object, but a companion to human hearts. And you, what does the moon mean to you? Is it a comfort, a muse, or simply a gentle reminder that even in the darkest night, something glows? Think also of calendars. Before clocks, before watches, before the hum of electricity, the moon told us time. Its cycle of about 29 days carved months into our lives. Lunar calendars guided planting, harvests, rituals, and festivals. Even today, holidays like Ramadan, Passover, and the Lunar New Year follow its phases. It's worth asking, if the moon had never existed, what would our calendars look like? Would we have counted only by the sun, marking days into endless repetitions without the poetry of crescents and crescendos? Without the moon's rhythm, would we have felt time differently, not in cycles but in straight lines? Perhaps without the moon, we would feel less connected to cycles of birth and renewal, less attuned to the natural rhythm of rise and fall. Our sense of time might be colder, more mechanical, less intimate. And then there are eclipses. Can you imagine being an ancient farmer, watching the moon slowly vanish in darkness or turn a deep, bloody red? What story would you tell your children to explain it? Some cultures feared the dragon that swallowed it. Others saw omens of change, of war, of renewal. Even now, when we know the mechanics, the Earth's shadow, the alignment, it feels eerie, powerful, otherworldly. The moon has a way of reminding us that science and mystery often walk hand in hand. Understanding doesn't always erase wonder. Sometimes it deepens it. Do you feel less awe when you know the reason for an eclipse? Or does the knowledge itself make the beauty richer? Let us wander into art for a while. Painters have set moons into night skies for centuries. Van Gogh's swirls, Turner's glows, Chinese scrolls with white circles among mountains and rivers. Poets have draped it in metaphor. A pearl, a lantern, a ghost, an eye. Sculptors carved its crescents into stone. Even architecture sometimes imitates its cycles, arches, domes, circular windows. Why does the moon fit so naturally into art? Maybe because it is both constant and changing, a paradox that artists crave. The same moon is seen by all, yet it looks different each night, and different in every heart. If you were to paint the moon, how would you do it? Bright and sharp, or hazy and dreamlike? Would it be the background, or the subject itself? But the moon is not only in art, it is in language. Think of how many words are tied to it. Lunatic, from the belief that the full moon brought madness. Moonstruck, to mean enchanted or dazed by love. Over the moon, to mean joy. Even honeymoon, once linked to the moon cycle after marriage. Doesn't it fascinate you that we've built so many metaphors around it, as though the moon were not a rock, but a reflection of our inner lives? The moon is not just in the sky. It is in our words, our music, our daily speech. Let us not forget the practical side. The moon's light allowed travel at night before torches and lamps. Armies marched under it. Caravans crossed deserts. Sailors steered by it. Even predators and prey adjusted their habits depending on its glow. Imagine a world where the night was always pitch black. Would human civilization have moved more slowly, confined to the hours of daylight? Perhaps the moon was a silent partner in our exploration, urging us to step into the night with just enough confidence to keep going. Now think of dreams. How many times has someone whispered a wish to the moon? How many people, across centuries, looked up and thought their thoughts were private, only to realize the moon had listened to millions before? Isn't that what makes it magical? That it connects strangers generations apart, across oceans and cultures? There is a story told in many lands. If you look at the moon long enough, you might see a face, a rabbit, a figure watching back. The man in the moon in Europe, the rabbit in the moon in Asia. Different cultures, different shapes, but the same instinct to see ourselves in it. Do you ever see shapes in the moon's craters? Do you ever catch yourself imagining it is alive, that it watches, that it remembers? And then came the 20th century. For thousands of years, the moon was untouchable, sacred, unreachable. And then suddenly humans walked on it. The Apollo missions took our stories, our myths, our longing, and turned them into footprints on dusty regolith. Do you think something changed in that moment? Did we lose some of the mystery by reaching it? Or did we gain a new kind of awe that even the most unreachable dream can be touched? The astronauts who stood there looked back at Earth and saw it as a fragile blue marble, glowing in the void. In some ways, the moon became a mirror again, this time not for love or myth, but for perspective. It showed us how small, how delicate, how precious our world is. And so, the moon continues to shape culture, not just in stories of gods and lovers, but in the way we see ourselves as a species, tiny and connected. So let me ask you, if the moon had never been there, what would human culture look like? Would we still sing as sweetly, write as richly, paint as passionately? Would our nights feel less poetic, our calendars less cyclical, our sense of time less humane? The moon has given us not just science, not just stability, but imagination itself. It has filled our minds with images, our words with metaphors, our art with beauty. And maybe that is its greatest role. Not just to pull tides or steady Earth, but to pull at us, to tug our minds toward stories, to steady our restless imaginations with its glow. Next time you see it, maybe you'll remember. Every poem, every song, every whispered prayer under the moon is part of a much larger chorus. Humanity singing to a silent, faithful companion. And isn't that a comforting thought? That in all our differences we have always shared the same moon. Have you ever considered how the moon has been humanity's guide? Not only in spirit, but in the very practical business of moving through the world. When you think of navigation, perhaps you picture compasses, maps, or GPS glowing on a phone screen. But long before those inventions, long before ships with sails or roads with signposts, the moon and the stars were our maps. Could we have dared to explore without them? Close your eyes and imagine standing on the deck of an ancient ship. The ocean stretches endlessly, dark and restless. No lights on the horizon, no familiar landmarks. What would you cling to for direction? Overhead, the moon keeps its steady rhythm, rising and setting, waxing and waning. And around it, the stars shift in patterns we now call constellations. For countless generations, sailors, nomads, and wanderers trusted the moon to mark time and guide their journeys. But why the moon, especially? Because it is bright enough to see, constant enough to trust, yet changing enough to remind us of the passing of nights. Isn't it strange that something so distant could become a compass for the very first explorers of Earth? Think of deserts, vast and dangerous. Travelers crossing sands at night, when the air is cool, when footsteps are lighter, would look upward. The moon lit the dunes, turning danger into silver. Without it, would those journeys have even been possible? And what about hunters, centuries ago, venturing out at night to track animals by moonlight? Or farmers, rising early to harvest under the full moon, when fields glowed softly without the need for torches? In fact, the harvest moon still carries that name, reminding us of when people worked the land in tune with lunar light. Do you see how the moon was never just decoration? It was a partner in survival, a lantern carried silently across the sky. Now let's stretch further to the oceans. The moon's pull on tides was not only a scientific curiosity. It was a practical rhythm for seafarers. By learning the cycles, they could predict when harbors would flood or retreat, when rivers might be easier to cross, when shorelines would open pathways across mudflats or close them in water. Isn't it fascinating that the same force that stirs plankton also once determined whether ships lived or sank? Some historians say entire empires depended on this knowledge. Think of Polynesian navigators who sailed thousands of miles of open ocean. They used the stars, the currents, the winds, and yes, the phases of the moon. Picture them reading the sky as if it were a living book, each glow and shadow a clue, each phase a reminder of how far they had traveled. Would such journeys have been possible without the moon? But the moon's role as a guide didn't stop with earthly voyages. It became a symbol of the ultimate journey, leaving Earth altogether. Have you thought about that irony? The very body that once guided our ships became the destination for our spacecraft. The 20th century made the moon not just a guide, but a goal. Humanity pointed rockets toward it, saying, "If we can reach the moon, we can reach anything." And in 1969, footprints pressed into lunar dust fulfilled that dream. Do you imagine what it must have felt like for those astronauts, looking back at Earth? To see the world as one whole, fragile, glowing sphere, and to realize that all of history, all of culture, all of humanity was behind them under that blue marble? The moon was no longer just a guide. It became a mirror reflecting back who we were. Ask yourself, why did we choose the moon first? Why not Mars or Venus or the asteroids? Perhaps because the moon has always been our companion, close enough to touch, familiar enough to trust. It was the next step, but also the most natural one. Doesn't it feel right that our first leap into space was toward something that had guided us for so long? And yet, stepping onto the moon also changed how we saw guidance itself. Suddenly, navigation was not only about oceans or deserts, it was about stars and trajectories, about orbits and gravity. The moon taught us to navigate space, just as it once taught us to navigate Earth. But what about the future? Will the moon continue to guide us? Scientists talk now of lunar bases, of mining resources, of using the moon as a stepping stone to Mars. Some dream of telescopes on its far side, free from Earth's radio noise, gazing deeper into the cosmos than ever before. The moon, once a compass, could become a harbor, a place to pause before sailing further into the cosmic ocean. Do you find that comforting or unsettling? The thought that one day humans might live under its shadow, not just visit briefly. Would the moon still feel like a guide, or would it become a neighbor, a new home? And yet, even if we build machines and bases, the moon will remain what it has always been. A steady light, pulling tides, marking time, whispering directions to those who listen. Isn't it strange that no matter how advanced we become, we still rely on the same celestial rhythm that guided our ancestors with nothing but open eyes? Think of it. GPS satellites orbit Earth, precise and complex, but even their designs depend on the physics the moon taught us. Astronauts still train with lunar data. Scientists still measure Earth's movements by watching the moon's orbit. The guide is still there, just in subtler ways. Let's pause and ask, how does guidance shape us? Without the moon, would we have learned patience by watching its cycles? Would we have learned courage by following it into the unknown? Would we have dared to imagine journeys beyond the horizon, beyond the planet? Guidance, after all, is not only about direction, it is about trust. And hasn't the moon always given us that? Picture yourself now, standing under the full moon. Imagine you are both ancient and modern at once. An explorer on a desert caravan, a sailor crossing the Pacific, an astronaut stepping onto alien dust. Each of them, in their own way, looks to the moon. Each of them, in their own way, says, "Guide me." Doesn't that weave us together? Past, present, and future? The same moon, the same glow, the same longing to know what lies beyond. So perhaps the moon is not just a rock, not just a reflector of sunlight. Perhaps it is a teacher of journeys. It has taught us to move through the night, to cross seas, to measure time, to dream of space. And each time we followed it, we discovered not only new lands, but new parts of ourselves. And isn't that the essence of guidance? Not only pointing the way, but awakening something within, the courage to step forward, the imagination to keep going, the trust to believe the path is worth walking. The moon has always been that guide, whether we notice it or not. So let me ask you softly, as you drift in thought, if you had no compass, no clock, no map, only the moon in the sky, would you still feel lost? Or would you feel, in some deep and ancient way, that you were exactly where you needed to be? Have you ever looked at the moon and felt there was still something it wasn't telling you? For all our science, all our rockets, all the stones we've carried back from its surface, the moon still keeps secrets. Isn't that strange? How something so close, so familiar, can remain mysterious? We see it every night, and yet so much of its story is unfinished. Its face is scarred with craters, its glow changes with the days, its orbit drifts slowly away, and still questions remain. What formed this world so near to ours? Why is its far side so different from the side we see? Could it still be holding clues about Earth, about life, about the universe itself? Let's wander softly into these mysteries together. The first question might seem obvious. Why does the moon look the way it does? When you look up, you see dark patches and pale highlands. People once called those dark areas Maria, the Latin word for seas. Of course, they aren't filled with water, but with ancient lava, oceans of rock that cooled billions of years ago. But why are there more of these plains on the near side, the side we always see, than on the far side, which remained hidden until the space age? Imagine it. For most of human history, we only knew half the moon, the same face turning toward us as if in endless conversation. Then, when spacecraft finally revealed the far side, we discovered it was different, rougher, more mountainous, fewer dark plains. Why? Was it thicker crust, formed unevenly at birth? Was it shaped by ancient impacts that only touched one hemisphere? The moon, it seems, is a riddle written on 2 pages, one familiar, one long concealed. And isn't there something haunting about the idea that we lived thousands of years knowing only half the story? Then there is the question of craters. Have you ever wondered why the moon looks like a battlefield, frozen in time? Every crater is a scar from an impact. Asteroids, comets, fragments of rock slamming into its surface. Unlike Earth, the moon has no atmosphere to burn them away, no weather to erode the scars, no oceans to soften the land. What fell upon it stayed upon it, etched forever. When you look at those craters, you are looking at history, collisions from billions of years ago, preserved like fossils in stone. Some of those impacts were so vast that they shaped not just the moon but Earth itself. The late heavy bombardment, scientists call it, a period when the inner solar system was showered with impacts. Perhaps those impacts carried water or even the ingredients for life to Earth. So here's a mystery. Without the moon's record, would we know our own history? Could it be that the moon is not just our companion, but also our archive, preserving memories that Earth itself has long since erased? And what about water? Does the moon hide it? For years, scientists assumed it was utterly dry. Then, in recent decades, we discovered traces of ice hidden in craters at its poles, where sunlight never reaches. Imagine that. Little pockets of frozen water, untouched for billions of years. Could these icy shadows hold secrets about the early solar system? Could they even one day support explorers, who might drink from lunar reserves or use the water to make fuel for journeys further into space? What a thought, that the same moon that has inspired myths of thirst and longing might, in reality, hold the most practical treasure of all, water. Another puzzle lies deeper. The moon has a crust, a mantle, and a core just like Earth. But its core is small, strangely so. Some say that when the giant impact occurred, much of the metal from Earth and the colliding body sank into Earth itself, leaving the moon with lighter rock. Others suggest the moon's insides cooled too quickly. But then, there's a question: why does the moon still have traces of magnetism? Signs it may once have had a magnetic field like Earth? Did the moon once shield itself from radiation, only to go quiet as its insides froze? When you stare at the quiet surface of the moon, do you ever imagine it once alive in its own way? Its core churning, its field humming, its volcanoes glowing with fire. And then there is the great mystery of motion. The moon is drifting away, for centimeters every year. Slowly, silently, its orbit grows. Long ago, it was closer. In the far future, it will be farther. One day, eclipses will end, because the moon will no longer perfectly cover the sun from our view. Why does it matter? Because in that drift lies a story of energy. Tidal forces, Earth's rotation, the subtle dance of gravity between two bodies locked in embrace. The moon slows Earth's spin even as it moves away. Our days grow longer, second by second, century by century. Isn't it humbling to think that the length of a day, the rhythm of life, is quietly rewritten by the moon? So ask yourself, when you wake tomorrow and live through another day, how much of that rhythm is a gift from the moon's steady pull? And then there's a question that stretches further. Is our moon unique? Many planets have moons. Mars has 2 tiny rocks, Jupiter and Saturn have dozens, Neptune and Uranus too. But none are quite like ours. None are so large compared to their planet. None shape their planet's tilt and tides in the same way. Could it be that Earth's life owes itself not only to having a moon, but to having this moon, this precise companion? And if so, what does that mean for life elsewhere in the universe? Would alien worlds need a moon like ours to nurture stability, tides, and time? Could the moon be not just our guide, but the reason we exist at all? And what about the human mysteries? People still ask, does the moon affect our minds, our moods, our sleep? Folklore speaks of madness under the full moon, of werewolves, of strange behavior. Modern science has searched for answers. Some say there is little proof, others find faint rhythms. But perhaps the truth is not in data, but in perception. The full moon glows brighter, shadows stretch longer, the night feels different. Isn't it natural that we, creatures of rhythm and light, would respond in ways we barely understand? Do you ever feel it yourself? A restless night under a full moon, dreams more vivid, sleep lighter? Could the mystery be not in the moon alone, but in how we respond to it, carrying instincts older than memory? Another secret. Why does the moon always show us the same face? It is tidally locked, its rotation matched to its orbit, so that one hemisphere forever turns toward Earth, while the other hides. But how did this happen? Over time, Earth's gravity slowed the moon's spin, until both fell into sync. It is an intimate alignment, as if the moon chose to always keep one eye on us, never turning away. Isn't that thought a little eerie, that the moon has a hidden face we never see, one that knows the stars better than it knows us? What secrets does it keep on that far side, in craters and mountains untouched by human eyes? And then the question of beginnings. The giant impact theory is our best explanation, but not our only one. Some suggest the moon formed alongside Earth, born together from the same dust cloud. Others imagine capture, that Earth pulled it in from elsewhere. Each theory carries puzzles. The moon's composition is so similar to Earth's crust, yet slightly different. It is like a sibling but not identical, like a fragment but not exact. So what is the truth? Is the moon Earth's child, its sibling, or its companion by chance? Each possibility changes how we see ourselves. For if the moon is born of Earth, then when we look up at it, we see a piece of our planet that left long ago, still circling us across the ages. And still, one last mystery lingers. Why does it matter so much to us? Why do we dream of it, sing to it, paint it, and send rockets toward it? The moon is not the brightest object in the sky, not the largest, not the rarest. And yet it captivates us endlessly. Could it be that the mystery itself is the answer? That the moon, in giving us questions without easy answers, invites us to imagine, to wonder, to keep searching? Perhaps the moon is not just a companion of Earth, but a companion of curiosity. So tonight, when you see it, remember, the moon is more than light, more than gravity, more than a rock circling Earth. It is a keeper of secrets. Some it has revealed, others it guards still. And maybe that is the greatest gift of all. Not just guidance, not just balance, but mystery itself. For without mystery, would we still look up? Would we still dream? And isn't that what the moon truly offers us? Not answers, but the eternal invitation to wonder? Have you ever wondered what the far future holds for the moon? Not just tomorrow, not just 1,000 years from now, but millions, even billions of years into the unfolding story of time. What becomes of this companion of ours when the ages roll on, when Earth itself is old and weary? Will the moon still circle us faithfully, or will its fate be stranger, lonelier, more uncertain than we can yet imagine? The thought is both haunting and fascinating. The moon is not fixed in place. Every year, it drifts farther away from us, little by little, as though pulled by some invisible longing. Just 4 centimeters per year, hardly noticeable in a single lifetime. And yet, across deep time, such small steps become enormous distances. One day, the moon will not be where it is now. It will slip away into a different orbit, its presence changed, its influence weakened. What does that mean for Earth? What does that mean for us? Let's begin with the tides. As the moon moves outward, the pull of its gravity will grow weaker. Tides, already shrinking fraction by fraction, will lose their strength. The vast breathing of the oceans, the rising and falling, the stirring and mixing will slow. Imagine coastlines quieter, waves less dramatic, tidal pools less alive. Would the seas grow stagnant, their rhythms dulled? Would the abundance of plankton and fish that depend on those tides begin to fade, slowly, imperceptibly at first, then more profoundly? It makes one wonder. If tides were midwives to life in Earth's early days, will their fading mark a kind of slow retreat of vitality in the oceans? The moon, which once helped awaken life, might one day see its gentle touch weaken, leaving the seas strangely silent. And what of Earth's spin? Even now, the moon slows us down. Each day grows a fraction longer because of its pull. Millions of years ago, Earth spun faster, days were shorter, nights came more quickly. In the far future, that slow unwinding will continue. Days may stretch to 25 hours, 30 hours, 40. Can you imagine a world where the sun lingers overhead for what feels like forever, and night itself lasts nearly an age? Would our rhythms of sleep and wake, of work and rest, remain the same? Or would humanity reshape its lives, its culture, its very sense of time to match the longer turning of the planet? Would we still measure our hours as we do now? Or would we invent new ways to count, new calendars for a slower world? And then there is Earth's tilt, the axis on which we spin. Right now, the moon steadies it, keeps it balanced. Without the moon's close presence, Earth's tilt might wander more freely. It could swing wildly, shifting climates into chaos. Ice where deserts once stretched, heat where tundra once slept. Seasons could become unpredictable, sometimes vanishing, sometimes extreme. Would life be able to adapt to such swings? Perhaps. Life is resilient. But human civilization, so dependent on farming, stability, and predictability, might tremble under such change. Do you ever wonder if the moon's true gift is not its light, but its quiet hand, steadying Earth like a friend who keeps you upright when you stumble? And what happens when that friend slowly steps back, letting you wobble on your own? Let's picture something even more distant. Imagine Earth and the moon locked together, not just in gravity, but in spin. Scientists call this a tidal lock. It may be billions of years away, but eventually Earth's rotation could slow until one side always faces the moon, just as the moon now always faces us. What would that feel like? Half the Earth would see the moon frozen in the same spot in the sky, never rising, never setting. The other half would never see it at all. Would those who lived under its constant glow feel blessed, comforted by its eternal presence? And would those who never saw it again feel abandoned, exiled from its silver touch? And here is the deeper question. If the moon no longer rose and set, if it became fixed in the heavens for some and vanished for others, would it still inspire poetry? Or would it become ordinary, just another part of the landscape, no more mysterious than a mountain or a tree? But there is an even stranger possibility. Far, far into the future, Earth itself will not remain the same. The sun will grow hotter, larger, swelling into a red giant. Oceans will boil, continents will burn. What then of the moon? Will it drift further still, circling a dying Earth? Or will the sun's swollen form capture it, drag it inward, melt it into dust? Perhaps, in those distant ages, the moon will survive longer than we do, circling a barren planet, its craters glowing faintly in the light of a dying star. Or perhaps it will be torn apart by gravity, reduced to a ring of debris, like Saturn's jewels, circling Earth in silent memory. Have you ever imagined Earth crowned with a ring, a final reminder of the moon that once was? Would future beings, whoever they are, look at those rings and tell stories of a great companion, once whole, now broken? And yet, there is another possibility still more haunting. What if the moon leaves us entirely? As it drifts outward, as Earth slows, perhaps one day the balance of forces will shift, and the moon may no longer be bound to us. It could slip into a wider orbit around the sun, becoming a wandering world in its own right. The moon, no longer Earth's guardian, but a traveler, alone. Would it still carry the memory of us? Would its craters, its footprints, its silent plains still whisper of the planet it once circled? And would Earth, left behind, feel smaller, emptier, without its companion? Imagine looking up and finding the moon gone. Not suddenly, but slowly over millions of years, fading into distance until one night it simply does not return. Would the stars feel colder without that silver glow? But perhaps we should turn the question around. What about us? What role will humanity play in the moon's future? Already, we dream of building bases there, of mining its minerals, of living under its sky. Perhaps one day humans will call the moon home, planting gardens and domes, watching Earth rise and set on their horizon. And if Earth becomes unlivable, could the moon be our refuge, a halfway house between worlds? Would that make the moon not just our companion, but our savior? Or would it be cruel, offering only survival in its barren dust, while Earth's green fades away? And if humanity spreads further, to Mars, to the stars, will the moon still matter? Or will it be left behind, a childhood friend we outgrew, remembered in poems but rarely visited? And yet, even if we leave it, the moon will still be there for a time, watching, circling, whispering its influence in ways we may no longer notice. Perhaps future civilizations will forget how deeply it shaped them. Perhaps they will see it only as a pale light, not realizing it once stirred the tides, steadied the tilt, lengthened the days, inspired the art that defined us. Do you think we might ever forget the moon's importance? Or will its memory remain in every story, every myth, every rhythm we carry forward? Let's pause for a moment and imagine. Picture a far future Earth. The oceans are quiet, tides faint. Days stretch longer than we can count. The tilt wobbles more, seasons swing strangely. Above it all, the moon hangs smaller, dimmer, farther away. Perhaps it still shines, but with less intimacy. Perhaps it no longer feels like a companion, but like a distant relative you can barely recognize. And yet, wouldn't we still look up? Wouldn't some child, even then, point to it with wonder, ask questions, dream stories? Maybe the moon's role is not in how close it is, or how strong its pull remains, but in the very act of drawing our gaze upward. As long as it shines, even faintly, it will remind us to wonder. And if one day the moon is gone, whether swallowed by the sun, shattered into rings, or wandering alone, what then? Will humanity, or whoever follows after us, create new myths of its absence? Will they speak of a time when Earth had a companion, a silver guardian, a muse of poets? Will they feel nostalgia for something they never knew, the way we long for stories of lost golden ages? Perhaps, in that far-off time, the greatest mystery of the moon will not be how it formed, or how it moved, but why it meant so much to us. Why we loved it, why we sang to it, why we never stopped looking up. So I ask you, if you knew the moon would one day leave us, would you look at it differently now? Would you treasure its glow more, knowing it is only a temporary gift? Or would you, like most of us, keep forgetting until it is too late, only realizing its value when it is gone? The truth is, everything in the universe changes. Stars fade, planets die, moons drift, but perhaps what matters is not how long something stays, but how deeply it shapes us while it is here. And hasn't the moon already done that, woven itself into our tides, our time, our culture, our hearts? Whether it drifts away, shatters, or survives longer than we do, its mark will remain, as eternal as memory itself. Have you ever asked yourself why the moon lingers so deeply in our dreams? Why, of all the lights in the sky, it is the one that seeps into our poems, our lullabies, our midnight imaginings. Stars scatter in countless numbers, the sun blazes with life-giving fire, yet it is the moon, silent, pale, steady, that slips most often into the chambers of our minds. Is it because it glows softly, not enough to blind, but enough to guide? Or because it changes, offering us crescents and crescendos, vanishing and returning, like a story always half-finished? Or is it because it feels close, near enough to touch, yet forever beyond our reach? Dreams, after all, are filled with symbols. And what could be more symbolic than the moon? A face in the sky, an eye watching us, a mirror of light. Some cultures see a man in its shadows, others a rabbit, others still a woman. Each one projects onto it something human, something familiar. Isn't that remarkable? That we cannot help but turn the moon into a reflection of ourselves. And maybe that is the key. The moon is a mirror not only of sunlight, but of our own thoughts. We place our fears, our hopes, our longings upon it. We ask it questions it cannot answer. We whisper to it secrets no one else hears. In that way, the moon is not just out there in the night sky. It lives within us. Think of how often the moon is tied to longing. Lovers separated by distance still look up at the same moon and feel close. Poets describe heartbreak by comparing themselves to the waning crescent, or joy by likening their hearts to the full moon. The moon becomes a symbol of absence and presence at once. There, yet untouchable. Have you ever looked at the moon and felt that someone else, somewhere far away, might be looking at it too? Isn't there a quiet comfort in knowing it binds us across distances? That no matter where you are on Earth, the same silver face shines above you, whispering of connection. But the moon is not always gentle in our imagination. There is also madness in its glow. The very word lunacy comes from luna, the Latin word for moon. For centuries, people believed the full moon stirred strange behaviors, that it woke restlessness, sparked violence, inspired madness. Werewolves were said to transform beneath it. Witches were thought to draw power from it. Night itself seemed more dangerous when the moon was bright. Why would that belief persist? Perhaps because the full moon truly does change the night. Shadows stretch deeper, animals behave differently, sleep feels lighter. Maybe we carry ancient instincts, creatures once more vulnerable under the bright night sky, alert to predators, restless in their bones. Or maybe it is simply the power of suggestion, the way our minds weave stories around light. Do you ever feel it yourself? A strange wakefulness under a full moon, dreams sharper, thoughts quicker, emotions closer to the surface? If you do, you are not alone. Even science has found hints, subtle changes in sleep cycles, small shifts in human biology that seem to echo the moon's rhythm. Could it be that, like the tides, our bodies are still pulled by its invisible strings? And what of fear? The moon sometimes vanishes, swallowed in shadow during an eclipse. Imagine the terror of ancient eyes watching the silver disk turn red, darkening into blood. How would you explain such a thing without science? To some, it was a dragon devouring the moon. To others, it was an omen of doom, a warning from the heavens. Even now, when we understand the alignment of earth and sun and shadow, eclipses feel uncanny, as though the world is slipping into a different kind of dream. Why does the moon inspire both wonder and unease? Perhaps because it hovers in the liminal, neither sun nor star, neither fully light nor fully dark. It exists in between, half presence, half mystery. And isn't that the essence of dreams themselves, living between waking and sleeping, between clarity and confusion? Let us think also of cycles. The moon waxes, wanes, disappears, and returns. Humans, too, live in cycles: birth, growth, decay, renewal. No wonder the moon has become a symbol of life and death, of fertility and rebirth. Across cultures, its phases have been tied to the cycles of women, the planting of crops, the flow of time itself. In dreams, the moon often represents change, transition, becoming something new. Have you ever felt yourself in a season of change and thought of the moon's phases as a kind of reassurance? That nothing stays the same, but nothing vanishes forever either. Even the darkest night is followed by return. Isn't that why we tell children to wish upon the moon, to trust it as a companion? It teaches, without words, that cycles are natural, that endings are not truly endings, but part of a larger rhythm. But let us wander deeper into the quiet psychology of it. Why does the moon feel so personal? Why does it seem to speak directly to us, when the sun, far brighter, rarely does? Perhaps because the moon belongs to the night, and the night is when we are most vulnerable. In the darkness, we dream, we confess, we reflect. The moon becomes our confidant, our silent witness. Unlike the sun, which dominates and dazzles, the moon listens. Its light is soft enough to allow thought, gentle enough to let imagination unfold. Think of the nights you have walked alone, feeling both solitude and comfort under its glow. Didn't it feel like the moon was there for you alone, even though billions share it? Isn't that a strange intimacy? That something so universal feels so personal? And dreams, how often does the moon appear in them? Sometimes as a guide, sometimes as a warning, sometimes as a distant, unreachable place. In dreams, the moon can be impossibly large, or impossibly close, or shrouded in shadow. It bends and shifts as our minds bend and shift. Why does it appear so often? Because it is always in us, always above us, always a part of our nights. The moon is woven into the very fabric of our subconscious. Have you ever dreamt of the moon? Do you remember how it felt? Not just what you saw, but what it meant. Did it draw you upward? Or did it remind you of something lost? Dreams are never just images. They are feelings wrapped in symbols. And the moon is the perfect symbol. Constant yet changing, present yet distant, light yet shadowed. Let us also consider how the moon shapes the collective psyche. Festivals are held by its phases, prayers whispered to it, myths carried through generations. Even modern culture cannot escape it. Songs, films, art still return to the moon as muse. It is both timeless and current, both ancient and alive in today's imagination. Could it be that the moon is humanity's shared dream? A symbol we all agree upon, across time and culture, as something larger than ourselves, yet tied to our deepest selves. And here lies a thought. Perhaps the moon does not just inspire dreams. It teaches us how to dream. By looking up at it, by wondering about it, by weaving stories around it, we learned the habit of imagination. And imagination, after all, is the root of all progress, art, science, exploration. Would we have reached the moon without first dreaming of it? Would we have painted stars without first painting it? Perhaps our minds grew larger because the moon was there to reflect our longing back at us. And so the question lingers. If the moon were gone, what would happen to our dreams? Would we find other symbols? Or would something essential in our imagination fade? Could the night feel as fertile, as poetic, without that glowing face above? It is almost too sad to think. Without the moon, perhaps our nights would feel not only darker, but emptier in spirit. For the moon does not only light the sky, it lights the corridors of the mind. So next time you see it, pause for a moment. Think not only of its tides, its science, its history, but of the quiet way it lives in your thoughts. Think of every poem whispered to it, every secret confessed beneath it, every dream shaped by its glow. And ask yourself, when you dream tonight, will the moon be there with you? Watching, listening, waiting, as it always has? Have you ever wondered how we first learned to measure time? Before clocks ticked, before sand fell through hourglasses, before even the wheel turned, how did early humans know when to plant, when to harvest, when to gather, when to rest? They looked upward, of course. The sun marked the days, the stars marked the seasons, but it was the moon that gave us rhythm, soft and visible, waxing and waning above our lives. Could it be that without the moon, the very idea of calendars, of counting, of keeping order, might never have been born? Imagine our ancestors long before writing, long before cities. They looked up at the sky and noticed something. The moon changes. A crescent grows to fullness. then shrinks again, disappearing into shadow before returning. Always the same cycle, always the same rhythm. Not too fast to miss, not too slow to ignore. A month, roughly 30 days. An easy, natural way to break the endless flow of days into something countable. Isn't it remarkable that time itself, the way we think about it, was shaped not by machines, not by invention, but by the quiet glow of the moon? Think of the first marks carved into bone, tens of thousands of years ago. Tallies, scratches, perhaps counting the days between phases. Some of the earliest evidence of human numeracy may have been lunar calendars. Imagine someone, huddled in a cave, etching lines into a piece of ivory to track the moon's cycle. Was it for hunting, for farming, or simply for the satisfaction of knowing the world could be ordered? Do you see how the moon became humanity's first teacher of time? Before kings, before empires, before clocks. There was the moon waxing and waning. Cultures across the world built calendars from its phases. The Hebrews counted months from new moon to new moon. The Chinese still celebrate their new year according to the lunar calendar, their festivals tied to the moon's glow. The Islamic calendar is purely lunar, with months beginning at the first sight of the crescent. In many Native American traditions, each moon had a name: harvest moon, wolf moon, hunter's moon, marking the turning of the year not in numbers, but in lived experience. Isn't it beautiful that the moon became a shared clock for humanity? Even across vast distances and differences, everyone everywhere could look up and know where they were in the cycle. But the moon's rhythm is imperfect. A lunar month is about 29.5 days. 12 of them make about 354 days, short of the solar year's 365. This mismatch created puzzles. Festivals drifted from season to season unless adjustments were made. Some cultures added leap months. Some shifted between solar and lunar reckonings. Some let the drift remain, embracing the moon's rhythm even when it wandered. Isn't it curious that so much of human history, so many arguments and reforms, were born from trying to reconcile two clocks in the sky, the sun's year and the moon's month? Even today, our Gregorian calendar, the one most of the world uses, still carries the echo of this struggle. Months remain, even if their lengths no longer match the moon. Do you ever stop to wonder when you flip a calendar page, when you say the word month, that you are speaking the language of the moon? And let's not forget agriculture. Farmers relied on lunar calendars for planting and harvest. The waxing moon was said to bring growth, the waning moon decline. Even tides influenced planting near coasts, water levels tied to the moon's pull. Though modern science might question the details, isn't it telling that entire civilizations once grew their food, their survival, by watching the sky's quiet changes? And what of rituals? The full moon was a time for celebration, for gathering. Fires lit under its light, dances held in its glow. In India, Buddhists still celebrate Vesak on the full moon, marking the birth and enlightenment of the Buddha. In Islam, Ramadan begins with the sighting of the crescent. In countless traditions, the moon's cycle is not just timekeeping, but sacred rhythm. Have you ever stood under a full moon and felt, without knowing why, that it was a night meant for gathering, for remembering, for something beyond the ordinary? Perhaps that is the memory of countless generations before you, who measured their lives by the same glow. But what about today, in a world of atomic clocks, satellites, and seconds counted more precisely than the blink of an eye? Do we still need the moon's rhythm? Perhaps not in the practical sense. Our months no longer follow its phases. Our workdays march to mechanical hours, our seasons tied to solar reckonings. And yet, the moon still draws us. Farmers still speak of the harvest moon. Children still learn about crescents and full moons. Lovers still mark anniversaries by it. Even our language clings to it: moonlight, honeymoon, once in a blue moon. Isn't it strange how even when technology replaces necessity, the poetry remains? The moon no longer keeps our time, yet it still keeps our imagination. And what of the future? If the moon drifts farther, if one day its phases no longer align neatly with our reckoning of days, will we abandon it altogether? Or will humanity always carry the moon in its calendars, in its words, in its cycles of ritual and memory? Perhaps time itself, as we measure it, owes its shape to the moon. Perhaps without it we would never have learned to divide, to count, to order our days. Imagine how different history might have been without the moon. Would agriculture have begun later, without clear cycles to guide it? Would rituals have formed differently, lacking the anchor of full moons? Would civilizations have struggled longer to create order from the endless stream of days? The moon was not just a light, but a ruler. A celestial clock whose tick was a waxing glow, whose talk was a waning shadow. And let us not overlook the personal clock within us. Circadian rhythms, menstrual cycles, patterns of sleep and wake, they too are tied, however subtly, to lunar phases. Long before science gave names to hormones and cycles, humans sensed the connection. They wove it into myth, into ritual, into meaning. Do you feel it? A restlessness during the full moon, a quieting during the dark moon. Science debates, but culture remembers. And memory, too, is a kind of truth. So let me ask you, what does the moon mean to your own sense of time? Do you notice it as days pass? Or do you lose it in the noise of clocks and schedules? When was the last time you marked a month not by dates on paper, but by crescents in the sky? Perhaps to live by the moon is to live slower, gentler, more attuned to cycles instead of straight lines. Perhaps we have lost something in moving to mechanical clocks, something of the poetry of time. And yet, the moon is still there, waiting. Each night it rises, each night it changes, offering you a chance to measure not by hours or deadlines, but by glow and shadow, by rhythm and return. What would your life feel like if you lived again by its phases? Would time feel softer? Would endings feel less final, knowing they are part of a cycle that always comes back around? The moon does not just give us time, it teaches us patience. It shows us that change is not loss, but rhythm. It shows us that darkness is not forever, but part of a cycle. And perhaps that is why, even now, in a world of atomic seconds, the moon remains our quiet calendar. Not because we need it, but because we cannot forget it. So next time you see it, ask yourself, are you counting days, or are you feeling cycles? Are you living by clocks, or are you living by rhythms? And perhaps the truest calendar is not the one on your wall or in your phone, but the one rising silently above you, reminding you that time itself is not a line, but a circle. Have you ever wondered why the moon and love so often find themselves entwined in stories? Why is it that when poets write of longing, of desire, of beauty glimpsed but never grasped, they so often turn their eyes to the night sky and borrow the moon as metaphor? What is it about that pale, glowing face that seems to mirror the mysteries of the heart? Perhaps it is the distance, close enough to feel present, yet forever unreachable. Perhaps it is the light, soft, silver, neither burning like the sun nor vanishing like the stars. Or perhaps it is the rhythm, the way the moon waxes and wanes, much as love itself grows and fades, falters and returns. Isn't it curious how across centuries and continents, people have whispered their affections under the same glow, sworn oaths to it, sung ballads in its honor? The moon, silent and constant, has been witness to every stolen glance, every kiss, every whispered promise. Could it be that in every tale of romance, the moon is an unseen character, hovering above the lovers like a guardian of their secrets? Think of ancient myths. In Greek stories, the goddess Selene fell in love with the mortal Endymion, visiting him each night as he slept. In Indian lore, Chandra, the moon god, was said to have many consorts, his phases reflecting his shifting affections. In Japan, the tale of the bamboo cutter tells of Princess Kaguya, a celestial being from the moon who captured the love of men on Earth before returning to her silver home. Isn't it striking that in these stories, the moon is never just a rock? It is always a lover, a beloved, or a symbol of longing that cannot be fulfilled. It makes you wonder, did the ancients see in the moon the same bittersweet beauty we feel when gazing at someone we love but cannot fully hold? Even today, the moon lingers in our songs. Blue moon, fly me to the moon, moon river. Each one uses the moon as shorthand for longing, for dreams, for intimacy just out of reach. Painters brush it into their landscapes not only to light the night, but to set a mood of tenderness, of melancholy, of hope. Lovers walking at night rarely say, "Look at the stars," but often, "Look at the moon." Why is that? Perhaps because the moon feels singular. Stars are countless, the sun is overwhelming, but the moon is one, just one, and always there. Love, too, at its deepest, feels singular, even in a world full of faces. And then there are the practical, human moments. Think of a walk under a full moon, hand in hand with someone you love. The air cool, the shadows gentle, the glow casting everything in silver. Doesn't it feel different from walking under street lamps, under sunlight? There is intimacy in moonlight, a softness that seems to slow time, to turn ordinary steps into memory. Could it be that moonlight is the most forgiving of lights, one that makes faces more beautiful, moments more tender, words easier to speak? How many confessions have been whispered under it, emboldened not by brightness but by glow? But romance is not always joy. The moon also reflects sorrow, longing, separation. In Chinese poetry, the full moon often symbolizes reunion, yet also distance, because two people under the same moon may still be far apart. During the Mid-Autumn Festival, families gaze at the moon to feel connected to loved ones who are absent. Have you ever looked at the moon while missing someone and felt that they might be looking too? Doesn't it bridge the distance, if only in imagination? The moon becomes a thread, weaving hearts together across oceans and years. And yet, it also deepens the ache, reminding us that closeness in spirit does not erase distance in body. Isn't that the nature of longing itself? Sweet and painful, present and absent at once? Think also of the language of the moon in love. Over the moon to describe joy. Moonstruck to describe being enchanted, dazed, dizzy with affection. Honeymoon for the first month of marriage, once tied to the moon cycle and mead brewed from honey. The very words of romance are tied to lunar rhythms, as though we cannot separate the glow of affection from the glow of the moon. Why does love feel lunar rather than solar? The sun gives life, warmth, energy, yet it feels too harsh, too public. The moon is private, intimate, shaded. Love, too, often blooms in quiet, in secrecy, in moments that are soft rather than blazing. Doesn't it seem fitting that the moon, not the sun, became the symbol of lovers? And then there are the darker shades. The moon has long been linked with mystery, with secrets, with madness. In romance, too, there is obsession, longing that turns unhealthy, passion that burns too brightly. The moon in its fullness is beautiful, but it can also feel overwhelming, even unsettling. Think of werewolf tales, of lovers driven mad by desire, of poets describing love as both ecstasy and torment. Could it be that the moon represents not only love's tenderness, but its wildness, the way it pulls us beyond reason, much like it pulls the tides? Do you ever feel that? That love, like the moon, has gravity, tugging at you invisibly, shaping your path whether you will it or not. And yet, through all its shades, joy, sorrow, tenderness, madness, the moon remains constant. It waxes and wanes, but it always returns. Perhaps that is why we tie it to love. Not because love is always steady, but because it is cyclical, resilient, always finding ways to return. Even after heartbreak, even after distance, love, like the moon, can grow again. Isn't there comfort in that thought? That the phases are not endings, but part of a larger rhythm. That absence can become presence. That darkness can become light again. Let us imagine for a moment. Two lovers, far apart, gazing at the same moon. One stands in a city, light drowning the stars but the moon still visible above skyscrapers. The other stands by the sea, waves silvered by its glow. Both look up, and though they do not touch, they share something. The same light, the same face. In that moment, aren't they closer than they realize? And now imagine another scene. A couple walking together, but in silence, perhaps unsure of what to say. Then one points upward, to the moon, and suddenly there are words, a shared focus, a shared wonder. The moon becomes not only a companion, but a bridge. How many times, across history, has the moon played that role, silent, patient, connecting hearts that could not connect alone. But let's also consider the moon's solitude. It orbits Earth faithfully, but it is alone in its journey. No companion, no twin. In that sense, it mirrors the loneliness within love, too, the way even the closest lovers remain, in some sense, separate beings, circling each other but never merging completely. Doesn't the moon remind us that love is both union and distance, closeness and mystery? That part of what makes love beautiful is that we can never fully possess it, just as we can never possess the moon. Perhaps that is why we keep turning to it. The moon holds contradictions, light and shadow, closeness and distance, presence and absence. So does love. Both are mysteries we live with, not puzzles to be solved, but companions to be experienced. And maybe that is the truest reason why the moon is the lover's symbol. Not because it is beautiful, though it is. Not because it is constant, though it is. But because, like love itself, it is both fragile and eternal, always shifting, always returning, always pulling us in ways we do not fully understand. So the next time you look up at it, ask yourself, what does it mean to you? Is it a reminder of someone far away? A companion on a quiet walk with someone close? A symbol of joy, of longing, of madness, of return? The moon will not answer, of course. It has no voice, but perhaps that is the point. Its silence allows us to pour our own meanings into it. And in doing so, we find that the moon has always been less about what it is, and more about what it reflects, our own hearts glowing back at us. Have you ever wondered why, when artists reach for symbols of mystery, beauty, or melancholy, they so often choose the moon? What is it about that pale circle in the sky that compels painters to place it in their canvases, poets to carve it into their verses, musicians to write entire melodies around it? Why the moon, and not some other wanderer of the night? Perhaps it is because the moon is both constant and changeable, a paradox artists understand well. It always returns, yet never looks quite the same. It is whole and then it is gone. It offers both clarity and shadow, both intimacy and distance. Isn't that the very essence of art itself? An attempt to capture what slips away, to hold still what is always moving. Think of a painter's brush. Vincent van Gogh, in Starry Night, painted the moon not as a cold rock, but as a glowing orb woven into a dreamscape of swirling stars. He painted it not as he saw it, but as he felt it. Doesn't that remind you that the moon is never only what it is? It is also what it evokes. Or imagine Caspar David Friedrich, whose landscapes often placed a lone figure staring at the moon across a misty horizon. His paintings were not just about nature, but about the soul, about longing, about the quiet ache of existence. Isn't it striking that he chose the moon time and again as the mirror for those emotions? Even Japanese ukiyo-e prints, delicate and precise, often frame the moon above cherry blossoms, boats, or mountain peaks. The moon there is not an intruder but a companion, gently setting the mood. Could it be that across cultures, the moon has always been more than backdrop? It has been the silent subject itself? And then poetry. Who could count the number of times the moon has been inked into human verse? Ancient Chinese poets like Li Bai wrote of gazing at the moon while drinking wine, using its light as a bridge to distant friends. In Persian poetry, the moon is often the face of the beloved, luminous and unattainable. In English verse, Shakespeare called Juliet the sun. But even so, his plays are heavy with moons, symbols of fickleness, of magic, of time. Isn't it fascinating how a single object in the sky can wear so many masks? To one poet, the moon is comfort. To another, it is longing. To yet another, it is deception. And yet, each of these interpretations feels true, because the moon has no single meaning. It reflects whatever the heart brings to it. Have you ever read a line of poetry about the moon and felt, yes, that is exactly what I feel, even though you know the poet lived centuries before you? Doesn't it almost seem as though the moon acts as translator, carrying feelings across time and language? Music, too, has long been enchanted by the moon. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Isn't the name itself enough to conjure the image of sitting at a window at night, listening to music ripple like silver light across still water? Claude Debussy's Clair de Lune, literally light of the moon, is soft, delicate, wistful, almost like the moon distilled into sound. And then there are the songs of the 20th century. Moon River, a dream of drifting and yearning. Blue Moon, a lonely heart suddenly finding love. Fly Me to the Moon, a promise wrapped in cosmic romance. Each one turns to the moon not for astronomy, but for emotion, for something timeless that no other symbol can quite capture. Why is it that when we want to write of hope or sorrow, of beginnings or endings, we so often let the moon sing for us? Maybe because music, like moonlight, works best when it cannot be held in the hand, only felt in the soul. Let's not forget stories and theater. Think of folklore. How many tales begin with a character walking under the moon? The moon is often the stage light, casting its glow on the players below. In children's stories, it becomes a friend, a confidant, sometimes even a character who listens and responds. In theater, too, the moon has often been a signal of mood. Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream unfolds almost entirely under moonlight, where magic and mischief play. The moon there is not passive. It is part of the very structure of the story, a symbol of the blurred line between dream and waking. Could it be that the moon, because it governs night, also governs imagination? That in its silver presence, boundaries loosen, realities soften, and art flows more freely? And then there is film. How many scenes can you recall where a full moon hangs above, almost like another character? Lovers kiss beneath it. Heroes walk in its glow. Monsters awaken at its rise. Even in modern cinema, directors turn to the moon when they want to say something beyond words. Think of E.T. with the bicycle flying across the moon's face, a single image that became iconic worldwide. Why the moon? Because it carries magic, wonder, and the sense that something ordinary can suddenly become extraordinary. Or think of the countless horror films that use the full moon as backdrop. Doesn't it give you a shiver? How the same moon that inspires music and poetry can also stir unease and dread. Again, we see its duality. Beauty and danger, dream and nightmare. But art is not only about the professional, the canvases in galleries, the sonatas in concert halls. Art also lives in ordinary moments, in the sketches of a student, the lyrics of a song scribbled in a notebook, the snapshot of a moon taken on a phone. Haven't you, at some point, tried to capture the moon yourself? Maybe with a camera, maybe with words, maybe with nothing more than memory? Why do we do this? When we know the photograph will blur, the words will stumble, the memory will fade. Perhaps it is because the moon reminds us of something beyond ourselves, and we long to hold it, even knowing we cannot. Isn't that the heart of creativity? To reach for what slips through our fingers, to make something fleeting last just a little longer? In this way, the moon becomes both muse and mirror. Artists turn to it not because it is easy to paint, but because it is impossible. Not because it is simple to explain, but because it resists explanation. The moon is inexhaustible, endlessly reflecting whatever mood, style, or vision we bring to it. And isn't that the mark of true art? That it does not have one meaning, but many? That it is alive, changing with each viewer, each era, each heart? So when we ask, why the moon? Perhaps the answer is, because the moon is like art itself, mysterious, fluid, timeless, impossible to own, but unforgettable to experience. Imagine, then, if the moon vanished, not just in science, not just in physics, but in art. What would happen to our stories, our songs, our paintings? Would lovers still walk under stars, but find the sky too empty, too diffuse? Would poetry lose one of its favorite metaphors? Would music drift, missing a companion note? Would art adapt, as it always does, finding new symbols, new lights to draw upon? Perhaps. Yet something would be missing. The singular glow, the gentle witness, the muse that has guided us for millennia. Could it be that the greatest loss of all would not be tides or tilt, but silence in our songs, emptiness in our paintings, absence in our words? And so, the next time you see the moon hanging above, think of it not just as a celestial body, but as the greatest collaborator humanity has ever had. A silent partner in art, a patient muse, a reflector of dreams. It does not create, it inspires. It does not speak, it listens. It does not move our brushes, our pens, our voices, but it pulls at something deeper, something invisible, until we cannot help but create. And isn't that, perhaps, the most magical role the moon plays? Not in the oceans, not in the orbit, not even in the seasons, but in the heart of art itself. What does it mean to dream of the moon's future? Have you ever stared at that pale face above you and wondered, not just where it came from, not only what it means, but where it might take us next? For so long, the moon has been the backdrop of our nights, a companion in myth and memory. But now, in this modern age, doesn't it feel as though it waits on the horizon like a doorway? Not a passive witness, but an invitation, a frontier, a question. What will humanity do with me? Think of how small we once were, gazing upward, tracing the moon's cycle with bone-carved calendars. Now imagine how vast we have become, rockets piercing the sky, astronauts setting foot on lunar soil. Yet, isn't it curious that even as our machines grew powerful enough to cross the void, the moment itself remained tender? Do you remember the famous words, "A giant leap for mankind," spoken not with thunder, but with quiet breath? Why is it that the moon, even in conquest, softens us? Even when science and ambition take us upward, steadies our hands. Doesn't it remind you that the moon is not just a target, but a teacher? And now we ask, what comes next? Will there be cities on the moon, domes glinting in sunlight, gardens under silver skies? Can you picture children born on lunar soil, their lullabies sung not of going to the moon, but of Earth, glowing in their night sky like a distant jewel? Wouldn't that shift our myths forever? Imagine. For all of human history, the moon has been our symbol of longing, but for them, those future children, it would be Earth that haunts their stories, Earth that inspires their art, Earth that becomes their muse. How strange, how humbling, to imagine the roles reversed. Of course, practical voices ask the harder questions. Can we mine the moon for resources? Can lunar ice provide water, fuel, perhaps even survival? Can the moon be a stepping stone to Mars, a harbor before we set sail into deeper seas? But beneath those questions lies another. Should we? If the moon has been our mirror, our partner, our muse, what does it mean to turn it into quarry? To drill into its silence? To scatter its dust with industry? Would we lose something intangible, something ancient? Or could we, with care, become not conquerors, but collaborators, building not to erase the moon's mystery, but to carry it forward? And then there is the matter of perspective. If humanity truly spreads to the moon, how will it change the way we see ourselves? From its surface, Earth is not endless. It is small, fragile, floating in darkness. Astronauts describe this as the overview effect, a shift in consciousness that makes boundaries seem absurd, conflicts petty, divisions thin. Could it be that living on the moon, staring at Earth as a daily sight, might transform us? Might it remind us not of separation, but of unity, that we are all children of one blue sphere, one shared home? And isn't that a kind of gift the moon has always given us, even from afar, a reminder of scale, of perspective, of wonder? Perhaps, in stepping onto its surface more permanently, we might finally learn the lesson it has been whispering all along. Yet I wonder, what becomes of the nights if the moon is no longer simply ours to gaze upon, but someone else's home? Will we still write poetry about its glow if we know behind that glow are solar panels and habitats, antennas and engines? Or will our stories evolve, just as they always have, blending the practical with the mythical? Could a new genre of myth emerge, one where the moon is no longer only a symbol of longing, but also of resilience, of adaptation, of expansion? Perhaps the moon's greatest role in our imagination has not yet been written. And then, even further, the moon as a gateway. Do you see how its gravity well, smaller than Earth's, could make it the launchpad for missions outward? Mars, the asteroids, even the outer planets. Like a quiet harbor where ships wait for favorable winds, the moon could become the place where humanity gathers before setting sail into the cosmic ocean. Isn't it fitting that the moon, which once guided sailors across earthly seas, might now guide us across the seas of stars? Doesn't that symmetry feel almost too perfect to be chance? like poetry hidden in physics? But here lies the question that lingers at the edge of this dream. Will the moon still feel like the moon if we live upon it? Will it still hold its mystery, its silence, its role as muse? Or will it become another place, another address, another site of human industry? Maybe it depends on us. Maybe the moon's future is not simply about technology, but about reverence. If we walk softly, if we remember its stories, if we hold onto its glow not just as resource but as inspiration, perhaps the moon can be both, a home and a mystery, a workplace and a muse. And what of you? Can you picture yourself standing on its surface, looking back at Earth? What would you feel? Pride, loneliness, wonder, or perhaps all of these at once? Would you miss the sight of the moon from Earth? Or would Earth's glow above the lunar horizon soothe that ache? And if you knew that humanity had become a two-world species, would you sleep easier at night, knowing our future was no longer tied to just one fragile planet? Or would you lie awake, wondering what it means to stretch so far from the cradle that once rocked us beneath lunar light? In this way, the moon's final gift may be not answers, but questions. Questions about who we are, where we are going, and how we will carry with us the beauty of what came before. Isn't that fitting? After all, the moon has never shouted, it has always whispered. It has never demanded, it has always invited. Perhaps its future role is simply to keep doing what it has always done, to pull at us, gently but firmly, the way it pulls the tides. To remind us to rise, to explore, to wonder, but also to reflect, to pause, to dream. So as we close this journey together, let me leave you with one final thought. The moon will always be with us, whether in our sky, our history, our art, or our future. Even if one day it disappears, even if one day its surface hums with human life, it will remain what it has always been, a companion, not a possession, not a conquest, a companion. And companions, after all, are not measured by how much they give us, but by how deeply they change us. Isn't that what the moon has done from the very beginning? And isn't that what it will keep doing, long after we have moved on to other horizons? Guiding, inspiring, reminding us that even in the vastness of space, we are never truly alone.